It's an ordinary August morning in 1997, but there's nothing ordinary about a suspicious phone call to 911. Something is terribly wrong, the caller says, in the home of William Williamson, an elderly Aliquippa man. Police rush to Williamson's house. There is no response to their demands for entry. They break in, and that's when they find Williamson beaten and suffocated to death. With few leads to go on, the investigation quickly stalls. Neighbors are left to wonder who would do such a thing to a nice old man who is known for his eagerness to help others. Who killed Bill Williamson? I'm LeVar McBride, and this is Cold Case Beaver County.
911, what is your emergency?
You got three people of interest still, say, I do. Three people of interest, then you get that blank face.
Now that's why nobody really knows if she is dead or alive.
He was set free and he was set free to go kill.
We've never gotten that one break. We've never gotten that one break. You know, we will though.
Police dispatch.
Yeah, my name is Bob Smith. Need to send a trooper up there to 161 Spring Street. I think this man beating his wife.
Okay. You want to leave your name?
My name's Bob Smith.
Where do you live?
I live on Planet 11. I just been riding down and I heard her yelling in there.
Okay, and they live at 161 Spring?
Yes.
And that's where you need the police at?
Yes.
What's your phone number?
I'm at a payphone.
Okay, sir.
All right.
Bye-bye.
The 911 call is placed at 11:20 a.m. August 20th.
Which, of course, turned out to be a bogus call. And we do believe that the person making that call either knows what happened, or was involved with what happened, or knows who was involved with what happened. Once I got there, we discovered the victim, William Williamson, with a pillow over his face. He had been beaten and asphyxiated with that pillow.
The caretaker of Spring Street, as his neighbors called him, Williamson raked leaves, cleaned up trash, and took pride in his neighborhood. Spring Street was regarded as one of those seemingly safe streets where everyone knew everyone else. And everyone knew Bill Williamson. He would often lend money to friends with no questions asked. Investigators believe his generous nature may have led to his murder.
We think that possibly he refused to give the money this time. And because a lot of these people were actually borrowing that money to buy drugs, we know that. And that's what led up to ultimately him being killed. The initial evidence that was gathered in 1997 was examined, and there was nothing that helped them identify the killer in any which way at that point. Even our suspects, the people whose names came to mind, these people had been invited in the house in the past, so their fingerprints, DNA, things like that can be easily explained by the fact that they had access to it.
Like the physical evidence, interviews with neighbors offered little insight, but investigators did focus on one neighbor.
One of the people who borrowed money off of Mr. Williamson that we looked at very closely was a man by the name of Melvin Johnson, who has recently passed away himself.
Just a few days after the murder, police received an anonymous phone call from someone stating Johnson is the man who has killed Williamson. The caller hangs up before the officer can ask any questions.
The investigation itself, even though it happened in August of 1997, it stalled out fairly quickly based on some changes within the Aliquippa Police Department, and that technology that exists today did not exist back then. There wasn't a lot we could do at that time in 1997 with an audio tape, the tape from the 911 center. The 911 call was when the police officers who did the initial investigation listened to it. You could tell it was somewhat of a phony call. The guy identified himself as Bob Smith, and yes, there are Bob Smiths around. There's no Bob Smith. We think that's a phony name. Number two, a couple of the investigators listened to the voice on the 911 tape, and by their own experience believed it was Melvin Johnson. Melvin denied that.
The 911 call is received more than 12 hours after Williamson was murdered. leaving Detective Timmy Patrick to believe whoever called 911 can't possibly have heard a man beating his wife in the Williamson home as he claims. The suspicion leads Patrick to believe the caller himself was involved.
Well, time to compose himself, clean up the scene as best they can, maybe try to establish an alibi, and if it was an accident or if it was something that was immediate, the phone call would have been placed right there on the spot, and investigators would have came to a fresh crime scene.
All the investigators knew that the call is the key to solving this case. We were able to obtain some phone conversations of Melvin Johnson from when he was in prison to see if we could match those up with the voice that's on the 911 call.
But once again, the investigation hits a wall. Analysis of the tapes proves inconclusive. The FBI will analyze the tapes to see if they can match the voices, but no one knows how long that analysis will take.
This is the kind of case that really needed to be worked hard and solved in a short period of time. With the delays and with the changes, and this case kind of, I don't want to say fell through the cracks, but we did not make that case as soon as it probably could have been or should have been.
We'll still have a long road ahead of us, but it definitely points us in the right direction, because the person that made that 911 call did have some vital information, and that person was interviewed during the course of our investigation. So if that person was not being truthful with investigators, that means that person did have something to hide at that time. You know, I think once we let the public know that we do have a suspect, people tend to come forward, especially once you start naming names.
Investigators like Davis acknowledge the unsettling effect that an unsolved homicide can have on a community.
I mean, it affects the community immensely, because you could be sitting talking to someone who committed a murder 16 years ago.